TheeSherm, there are technical quirks in the anomalous workings of these things. We are now beginning the story again as our audience gathers. Remember that if you are waiting to get in, you can watch this on YouTube, as well as Twitter and Facebook. We are now waiting for the next people to sign in. Interesting. We have got the live broadcast. We do not want to stop the broadcast. We want to continue the broadcast. All right, we are starting to see this work again. Are you hearing me now? Is this audible? Are we live? Are we testing? We have sound. Well, that's something. If everybody is here and ready, then let us begin. SCP-3041. Object Class: Safe. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-3041 is to be kept in a secure locker on site. Researchers are not to hold SCP-3041 or allow it to come in contact with their bare skin. As of May 22nd, 2015, all access to SCP-3041 is prohibited pending further review. Furthermore, Until this review is complete, the information below should be regarded as outdated and possibly inaccurate. Description: SCP-3041 is a 12-centimeter iron knife of unidentified origin with a hilt wrapped in braided leather. Radiometric dating shows inconclusive results for the age of the blade, but indicates the hilt was added within the past 2 centuries. The knife's surface is rust-colored and smells of spoiled meat. Despite the extensive analysis, a source for this odor has yet to be determined. SCP-3041 exhibits its anomalous property only once it has been held by a sapient subject for a certain period of time. The length of time required to trigger SCP-3041's effect varies wildly. The underlying mechanism remains unknown. Once SCP-3041 has activated, subjects will eventually experience a dream wherein they use SCP-3041 to attack one or more persons, removing and consuming their hearts. This dream is set wherever the subject initially held SCP-3041, and typically involves victims one would expect to find in this setting. In all cases, subjects do not recognize their victims. No victim is known to correlate with an actual person, alive or dead. Subjects will often continue to have recurrences of this dream with little variation. Though amnestics reduce or even eliminate these occurrences, most subjects continue to show signs of an emotional distress, guilt, and psychological trauma associated with PTSD. SCP-3041's effect can be triggered multiple times, producing new dreams in each case. SCP-3041 was found among the personal effects of Daniel Cranshaw, an elderly recluse and collector of historical antiques, who committed suicide on February 15, 1987. SCP-3041's anomalous nature was discovered when, in reviewing the contents of Mr. Crenshaw's collection, a researcher began experiencing dreams similar to those described in Mr. Crenshaw's suicide note. Addendum 3041.1 Attachments. Notably, this 5th series of tests was the last series of tests of SCP-3041. Subject: D85373. Summary: D85373 was placed in a room alone with SCP-3041 and asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Result: sleep study revealed no unusual sleeping patterns. D85373 reported no unusual dreams. Researcher note: nothing unexpected. Summary: D85373. Subject: the summary is, D85373 was placed in a room alone with SCP-3041 and asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Result: sleep study revealed acute night terrors. D85373 described a nightmare in which she used SCP-3041 to ritualistically mutilate another occupant in the room over the course of 30 minutes, finally devouring his heart. Although D85373 described the victim as someone wearing a D-Class uniform, the victim's description fit no D-Class personnel on site. Furthermore, no D-Class personnel on site were reported as absent or missing. Researcher note: still unable to determine what triggers SCP-3041's effect. Possibly repetition of exposure. Subject: D85373. Summary: D85373 was placed in a room alone with SCP-3041 and asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Result: sleep study revealed acute night terrors. D85373 described a new nightmare in which she had used SCP-3041 to attack and mutilate a researcher who entered the room at the end of the test. No researcher on site fit D85373's description. Furthermore, no researcher on site was reported as absent or missing. Researcher's note: we ought to include additional D-Class personnel in the room during testing to see if they're incorporated in the subject's nightmares. Subject: D85373. Summary: D85373 was placed in a room alone with SCP-3041 and asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Result: sleep study revealed acute night terrors. D85373 now described a nightmare wherein she attacked and devoured the hearts of 2 D-Class personnel. Again, the description of the victims fit no on-site D-Class personnel, and no D-Class personnel were reported absent or missing. Researchers note, despite having left explicit instructions to include additional D-Class personnel in the room, the test was carried out with only D85373. I will oversee the next test personally. Also, staff has started to complain of a peculiar smell in the lab, possibly linked to SCP-3041. Subject, D85373. Summary, D85373 was placed in a room alone with SCP-3041 and asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Result, several hours into the test, D85373 doubled over and complained of extreme stomach pain. Shortly thereafter, she passed out. After being rushed to the infirmary, it was determined that her stomach had ruptured. She died shortly thereafter from septic shock. An autopsy gave no indication as to the cause. Despite pronounced swelling, her stomach was empty. Researchers note, after analysis of notes I took during this test, I found that I had made 9 separate attempts to have 2 D-Class personnel enter the room. I have no recollection of doing this. In fact, outside of D85373, there are, and never have been, any D-Class personnel assigned to SCP-3041. On top of all of this, the smell throughout the lab has become unbearable. I've ordered the immediate cessation of all tests with SCP-3041 pending review by the site director. This is the administrative memo for the tests. 2. Researchers assigned to SCP-3041. Subject, immediate action. Cease all testing. After a careful review of laboratory procedures, test footage, and personnel records associated with SCP-3041, the following inexplicable discrepancies have been noted. Despite regulations requiring each SCP to have both a lead researcher and an assistant lead researcher, it appears only a lead researcher was assigned to SCP-3041. The reason behind this oversight is currently under review. Second, critical site-wide shortages of D-Class personnel have been reported since testing with SCP-3041 began. These shortages have yet to be explained. While no D-Class personnel appear to be absent or missing, only a fraction of the expected number of D-Class personnel are present. Third, despite each test with SCP-3041 reported as only lasting 10 minutes, video footage for each test ranges from 10 minutes to 4 hours. Furthermore, when viewed, this footage exhibits what is believed to be a cognitohazardous effect. Only portions of the video can be perceived by viewers. Fourth, despite several thorough examinations, the labs used for testing SCP-3041 continue to smell of rotting meat. This effect remains unexplained and is very likely anomalous. For these reasons, all testing with SCP-3041 is to be suspended until further notice. SCP-3041 is to be secured in an on-site safe box immediately. All labs used to test SCP-3041 are to undergo a Class 6 decontamination procedure, and all personnel involved in testing are to be examined for potential infection with antimimetic agents. This is the suicide note of one Mr. Daniel Crenshaw. The following note was found at Mr. Daniel Crenshaw's desk shortly after his body was discovered. The nightmare began a year ago, and it still won't stop. In it, my arm is wet with blood, and the knife in my hand, glittering, shining like a ruby. My heart beats like a drum before me. I see the faces of strangers contorted in agony, screaming for mercy. A woman, a man, children, 3 girls and a little baby boy. I do not know them. I cut them open. I cut them open, and I eat their hearts. I know it's just a nightmare, but it feels so real, so vivid. And there are times when I swear I can taste raw meat on the back of my tongue, when I can feel it slide down my throat into my belly. I've lived a long, lonely life. I've never known friends or family. So why do I live in a house with so many rooms? Why does each room fill me with guilt and dread? Why can't I bring myself to go down to the basement? Why does it smell like rotting flesh? And why do I own a crib? My nightmare took place under the house. I've never gone down to look. I'm too afraid. If you're reading this, then you'll have to look for me. Maybe you'll find nothing. I pray you find nothing. Either I'm crazy, or I'm the devil. Please God, let me be crazy. Despite a thorough investigation of Mr. Crenshaw's basement, researchers reported that the only thing of note was the overpowering odor of rancid meat. And that concludes the documentation for SCP-3041. At this point, we will open up the windows to discussion for those who wish to, quote, grab this spot. We're going to open discussions with containment procedures and just what the hell happened with SCP-3041. While we see if the cameras are going to work for people, it is noted that this is one time when we do not redact the name of the victim, the person of interest who found this, whose SCP was found here. While I am not the lead researcher on this case, I can say that once in a while, when it is just a normal civilian, it is not necessarily important to hide who they are. And although this applies to the literary critique part of the later discussion, I will say that if you are making a document meant to, how we say, appeal to horror writers, giving your person a human name can be useful in humanizing them for the audience. But now my first question for debate, whether it be in the text or the video, is this. Would you suggest any alterations to the containment procedures of this SCP? Our current containment procedures are, again, that SCP-3041 is to be kept in a secure locker on site. Researchers are not to hold SCP-3041 or allowed to come in contact with their bare skin. As of May 22, 2015, all access to SCP-3041 is prohibited pending further review. Furthermore, until this review is complete, the information below should be regarded as outdated and possibly inaccurate. Very succinct, very brief. Do we need something more secure for this? Do we need something less secure for this? Are we holding it too tightly for these 4 sentences of description? Rockteeth Moth Eyes in this text chat points out that they find the containment procedures to be sufficient. As long as no one is touching it, there seems to be no issue. That does seem to be the case. I do have a curious question myself, which is that researchers are not to hold SCP-3041 or to allow it to come in contact with their bare skin. I'm wondering why there's a distinction. Do we know if holding it outside of your bare skin is enough? Is it skin-to-skin contact that activates the anomaly, or is it being in the ownership of such a thing as a metaphysical idea might be? Curious. Liz in the chat wonders if proximity itself is an issue. I would imagine that if it can be locked in a safe box, as long as you are not in possession or touching it with your skin, it should be fine. The difference between holding it and having bare skin contact intrigues me. Were we testing this, I might suggest a glove, but as long as we are not testing this, we will let that lie. It is also asked by Liz that maybe carrying it around for long periods could be an issue. In our testing series, it seems to be that the amount of time you hold it for must be, interestingly enough, each test in the original series, in the final series anyways, was asked to hold it for 10 minutes. Now, it does not say that they held it for any less than that. It does say that if they did hold it for more, then the amount of time we remember in our tests is 10 minutes. Interesting. I wonder what holding it for 2 minutes would do. Senpai suggests some more D-class. I think we have, even giving D-class gloved hands to test this, I would be worried about just a waste of resources at this point. In this one alone, we are missing a total of 1 researcher, it seems. 1 D-class. 2 D-class. 2. At least 20 D-class personnel were lost in this test alone, or in this series of tests. This is the 5th series of tests, meaning that there were 4 series of tests before that. I wonder just how many personnel we lost in this. I say this, even though it seems like we haven't lost any at all. It's very strange. All right, so my second question for the Foundation staff would be, is there any potential use for this SCP to benefit our organization, whether it's in containment efforts on another SCP, some sort of use for its cognitohazard? Could we put this to use as we do some SCPs? Senpai points out that if we're going to have, if a breach happens and they happened to get a hold of the knife, it would be nice to have a test on it. I don't think we're in the series of those kind of accidents, thankfully. It is a nice wish that D-class grew on trees. Liz wonders what happens if you use it as a knife. If you use it as a knife, I mean, the idea, the nightmare here of stabbing someone, cutting out their heart, and eating it is technically using the knife as a knife. I mean, I guess you could attempt to butter your bread, but you might end up with more heart on that bread than you intend. So yes, my next question. Is there a potential use for this SCP outside of containment beneficial to the Foundation? Could we use this to contain another SCP? Rockteeth Moth Eyes suggests, absolutely not. The effects seem to be most random in terms of dreams, although it's difficult to say whether its effects breach consensus normalcy. That is true. It would be. This does seem, until we understand its effects better, less likely to be useful in a positive application. Now here's an interesting proposal. What SCP, if any, would be beneficial to us if we cross-tested with it? Can you think of any object or creature in our containment that would be interesting to cross-test with this SCP? I imagine that cross-testing SCP-3041 myself could be interesting with anti-memetic SCPs, if that truly is the cognitohazard we're dealing with here. And if we are extrapolating that these things may or may not exist after the fact, Senpai suggests SCP-58. Give me a moment, I'm going to look that up for reference. SCP-58. Oh my. SCP-058, skimming, is a Keter entity. Walls constructed of reinforced heat-resistant steel. My, oh my. Aren't you the dangerous one? To date, SCP-058 has been responsible for the death of at least 149 Class D personnel and 14 agents at its current site. That's impressive. Then again, SCP-3041, if the 5th series has killed 20 D-Class personnel, it seems as if these ones are in a contest, for Christ's sake. SCP-058 resembles a bovine heart with 4 arthropod-like legs used primarily for movement, and 4 tentacles of adjustable length covered with razor-sharp spines. It has a sharp stinger and 4 tentacles of adjustable length covered in razor-sharp spines. It has a single sharp stinger on its rear, where the hole for the superior vena cava would be in a typical organ. SCP-058's tentacles can be whipped to a distance of 3.2 meters, at speeds in excess of 320 kilometers per hour. What the hell is this thing? SCP-058 has been shown to be highly resistant to trauma and should be approached with caution even when it's apparently incapacitated. Highly mobile, capable of rapid movement, speaks in a human voice, though no method of producing sound has been observed, with a vocal tone and accent of an elderly British male with a slight lisp and deep voice. It talks constantly, regardless of conditions. It's encountered as site data extremely hostile when agitated. It attacked the site itself in the death of several faculty and agents, went on the attack of a nearby town, resulting in the death of over a redacted amount of citizens, and destruction of 70% of surrounding buildings. The majority of deaths were attributable to fire and fire-related injuries, resulting from widespread of stinger fluid. Okay, this is intense. We have an interview log. I had the dream of the queen wonders that lived inside the hearts of love and silent treatments of all the elderly that I knew were once whole. What is your name? I see the revelations of all the holy told the unwise in the dreams of cold embers in the sunlight that fade across lakes of black blood and snakes that eat the loaves of children, lamb, and trees of autumn. What is your name? Endless suffering is the woe of ignorant men who never seek to lack the depths of their own hearts and only see the wealth of a poor world suffering to flay its own back in knife wounds of silver and brutal gladness. Where are you from? The nightmare is a dream to the nameless slug that wanders across minefield and the remains of deer and kings. Personnel D067 replies, "This is some creepy ass," before he cuts off and is apparently murdered. Nightshade is shadows in all honest blinks through the bile of newborn plagues. Instant warmth is a mother's milk in dreams before anything was ever evil. Personnel continues screaming. Doctor attempts to get him to let go. In seconds, the sun is beating the drums in all hearts. The ear eat the ear of noise. Screaming is cut short. The sensual violence of lust is all the assurance you will ever need to know the worth of life. So, I don't think that we would want those two to meet. One causes you to eat hearts. One is a heart that will essentially eat you, or at least burn you, or at least stab you. Possibly all three, simultaneously. Meanwhile, it's been suggested by Rock Teeth Moth Eyes, I believe. SCP-990, the Dream Man. Let's pull up SCP-990 to discuss. Oh yes, SCP-990, of course. A Keter entity we cannot contain, and who visits you in your dreams. It has been appearing to Foundation personnel specifically since data expunged. Existence came to light when several agents discussed having dreams involving a similar individual. After 40 hours of sleep, subject awakened in a highly agitated state from a visit, yelling loudly about the end of the world. Subject described a man matching the regular appearance of SCP-990. Tony is his name. Yes, I had forgotten that. Oh, no? Richard. Predicting harm of Foundation personnel. It isn't completely impossible to conceive that SCP-990 could in fact visit someone who was under the influence of SCP-3041. Were this to be the case, I wonder if he could interfere in what was going on. Yes, I wonder what the difference would be if he appeared in the dream of someone who is holding the knife. And I wonder what would happen if he appeared in the dream of someone who didn't exist, but appeared in the dream of the knife holder. If it's possible to appear in a dream within a dream. Interesting ideas for cross-tests. Now, the next question is where things get scary. These were ones where it might make an interesting result to cross-test. Which things on our database should we never, ever attempt to cross-test with SCP-3041, do you think? And before anyone says it, SCP-682 does not need to be cross-tested with SCP-3041. On the off chance that it is causing some form of violence in the dreamscape. Ha! Yes, Senpai, I did think someone was going to mention that. Now, an interesting result of that would be, let us posit for a moment that if this document is, let's say, deleting things from existence. Obviously, these things didn't exist in the first place, but let's, for the sake of academic debate, what if we handed the knife to somebody in the room with SCP-682? It could be an interesting situation to see how he escaped from it, for one thing. SCP-1237 has been suggested. Let us take a look. A Keter entity represented an EEG readout. Due to its pandemic and incorporeal nature, it cannot be contained in a traditional sense. Containment shall be focused on information management. Oh my. Sponsor efforts to promote widespread DNA testing of civilians for the purpose of identifying positive entities associated SCP-1237-1. Oh, boy. Detained immediately for study and debriefing, administered class Omega amnestic and detained indefinitely. High-profile persons or public places affected. Foundation authorized to take whatever steps necessary to prevent public knowledge of this change. So what are we getting into here? A state of electrical activity in the human brain observed in certain individuals during periods of extremely deep sleep. The state, informally dubbed level 5 sleep or epsilon wave sleep, profoundly difficult to awaken the subject from prior to adoption of current containment protocols, experience with loud noise, bright lights, chemical injections, electrical stimulation, oxygen deprivation, physical injury and mutilation, and redacted, all failed to arouse the suspect. Experience at least one of these events in your lives. Less percentage experience 2 or more. Whereas SCP-1237-1 negative individuals do not exhibit REM activity during the deepest stage of sleep. Positives do. My, oh my, oh my, this is intense. Oh my God, if we handed someone with this kind of infection, SCP-3041, we've already seen cases where SCP-3041 can, if the current testing log is accurate, security tapes show that we had tests lasting up to 4 hours. And then cognitohazardously shown as being 10 minutes. That's 3 hours and 50 minutes of lost time. If these people were not able to be aroused, any mental changes that occur to the subject in the dream will occur to their waking form as well. Some things we are lucky not to have to deal with. Rock Teeth Moth Eyes in the chat suggests SCP-515, which would likely result in 3041 being unretrievable. A quick look at 3515. I'm going to have to come back to 1237, possibly for a future broadcast. Investigations are necessary for something so long and dangerous. Standard art locker, charcoal drawing. Low volume auditory hallucinations describe the sound of slow, steady digging. Notes compared to test subjects have been most commonly matched. SCP-351 hallucinations with recordings of manual digging with a metal shovel and heavy clay soil. If the affected individual is no longer in proximity, these auditory hallucinations cease. If they fall asleep while in proximity, that individual will spontaneously dematerialize. Wow. Quite the interview log. Hallucination, not paying attention. Well, we don't need a complicated manner to dispose of SCP-3041. It seems safe enough if we transmit it in our box. But if we did need to somehow neutralize it, it's not the worst. Well, again, the dreaming of a dreamer. There's some Inception levels of trickery going on in this one. All right. That concludes the research-centric area of discussion. Moving on. I am opening the floor to discussion of the literary analysis of SCP-3041. As we all know, the SCP-4 Foundation's cover is that it is a creative writing wiki. And so being able to critique this article as it is for things like character and story will allow us to better cover our tracks in future articles. And so, I did not over the course notice any spelling or grammatical errors. Or did I? There was one time where I read something that I want to verify. While I am scanning and while we are scanning, if you have any ideas on characters such as Mr. Crenshaw or the researcher who used all these D-class, if you have any use on the cliche of wasting resources, this would be the time to bring these things up. Cognitohazardous effect. I'm going to find the word cognitohazard because I know that's the one that bothered me. Nope, find on page. Cognitohazard. There we are. And so, during the note from the administration, I do know that when I said, furthermore, when viewed, this footage exhibits what is believed to be a cognitohazard effect. The writing part of my brain concedes that, believes that that would be a cognitohazardous effect rather than a cognitohazard effect, but I don't think it is far enough removed to be worth correcting. Furthermore, when viewed, this footage exhibits what is believed to be a cognitohazard effect. Furthermore, when viewed, this footage exhibits what is believed to be a cognitohazardous effect. I guess that one's a matter of opinion. While rolling through the chat, rolling through your checks, Liz suggests perhaps more research notes, though agreeing that vagueness adds to the mood. Indeed, this one is definitely meant to be somewhat mysterious. In fact, I think it's supposed to be very mysterious. From a literary standpoint, I believe we're allowed to assume that things are being deleted from reality, which is why we can't find it. Rock Teeth Moth Eyes in the chat points out that implicit detail is a key point to the article. We are able to find our way to the solution with a modicum of thought. And finally, in Mr. Crenshaw's desk note, very simple. It's a very simple note. I have thoughts and feelings about that note, but I can't quite enunciate them yet. There's something. I'm wondering if I'm feeling. I'm wondering if I'm feeling. Oh my God, I have feelings. Rock Teeth Moth Eyes believes the article is well paced, things become more intense as time goes on, and leads to a satisfying creepy resolution in their opinion. Yes, I guess in my My feeling on this note is, in one hand, there is such a simplicity to it. And it seems like at the end of everything we've got here, complexity and implicit detail, something simple like that with a human character in distress does ring true, does ring an emotional bell that is needed at the end of all of this. Unless anybody else has any other critical analysis questions or answers on this file, it's the end of this part of discussion. I open the floor to questions from the audience. I believe earlier in the chat, I'm going to scroll up. There was a question. There we go. Big Bad Brad, earlier, about 25 minutes ago, asked what Site-42 was. In the meantime, Site-42 is many things. It is this site that we are broadcasting from. It is a YouTube channel. It is a channel here on GetVokl. Site-42 is an SCP Foundation FanWorks channel. And with that, I believe we have found our way to the end of the broadcast. I wish you all a good job. Thank you for tuning into the Site-42 Anomalous Broadcast. Be safe out there, and continue to secure, contain, and protect. Good night.